Money means different things to different people. To some people, it means power, prestige, influence. To some others, it means freedom and the ability to do whatever you want and live limitlessly. People like me, that is. And to others, it is the root of all evil. But across generations, these meanings have shifted in very fascinating ways. Think about this. Why is it that baby boomers or older people in general prioritize saving money and owning a home, while Gen Z are all out there living that YOLO life? For all of you who don't know what YOLO is, it basically stands for you only live once. Okay, that's uh, why they live recklessly, let's say. I'm sure you've had your fair share of dinner table conversations around money, and every single person has had a view that you completely disagree with. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. We're going to be diving into the psychology of money, specifically how the mindset around money has evolved across generations. Hello, everybody. My name is Lakshan, and I'm your host for this episode.
And I'm Goldie, and this is episode 19 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast.
This episode is inspired very heavily by this book, The Psychology of Money, by author Morgan Housel. And in this book, he explains how our beliefs about money are more or less about our emotions and experiences, and not so much about the technicality and the math behind it. And we are going to put a generation's twist to it and explore how these emotions and experiences have changed the way that we view money today. We'll be breaking this episode down into three segments. The first one being how the economy has shaped each generation's view of money. The second one being the differences in the attitude towards wealth and risk. And the third one being the generational shifts in values around financial success. While today's episode is all about money, I want to mention one thing that is free first, which is subscribing to this podcast and leaving a like if you're watching us on YouTube, and leaving us a 5-star rating and review if you're following us on Spotify or any other audio platform. Now, with that very, very seamless yet shameless plug out of the way, let's move into the first segment of the episode, which is how the various eras are influenced by the economy of their time. Now, Morgan Housel says that your personal experiences with money shape your beliefs more than objective facts. What that means is that the era in which we grow up, the booms, the recessions, the cultural norms, social events, all of these are what leaves a lasting mark on how we think about money. When you look at baby boomers, for example, they grew up in a time post World War II, very prosperous time. Jobs were stable, pensions were the norm, opportunities were booming, and so were so were babies. But they also saw the major recessions in the 70s and 80s. So for them, saving money and owning a home was equal to security. That's what security meant for them. Gen X, that's Goldie's generation, had a very, very different experience. They came of age during a time when it was like stagnation, inflation, right? The job market was unstable, very volatile in the 80s and 90s. So they value financial independence, but they're also very pragmatic. They prioritize investments in things like mutual funds and real estate. Millennials, people like me, I suppose, on the other hand, we were shaped by the 2008 recession. And it was a difficult time given that the ones who got out of the schooling were not able to get jobs, and the ones who did get jobs were had to be let go basically, and that led to this mass job instability, and student debt was on the rise, because of which this generation was very cautious about big investments. They had to find a different way to go about doing this, and hence they became a lot more entrepreneurial, and they started this whole culture of the side hustle. Then we have Gen Z, who are raised in an era of abundance, but have been very heavily influenced by social media, because of which they focus on experiences over possessions. But they also have experienced a time of economic uncertainty, because of which they are a lot more savvy about digital finance like cryptocurrency, things like NFTs and like stock trading apps, which I'm a fan of, by the way. Stock trading apps, not crypto so much. So, Goldie, we've already spoken about how various generations have experienced their era while growing up, but we never really touched upon the finance or money aspect of it. What's coming up for you as I share all these things with you?
What I picked up as a summary for all the generations, Lakshan, was some sort of experience that is shaping their ability to spend or their psychology behind how they spend. So what's really essentially coming up for me is financial literacy. And why do I say this? It's because I think money is related directly to education about money and what it means to spend, what it means to create a budget, what it means to have an emergency fund, or what is credit, what is debt. These are all things that don't naturally come in conversation when you're having a recreational social gathering, but I feel that they should be had, especially in a family setting. And I think that is what makes or breaks almost the way that you choose to spend your money from the earliest age of when you receive pocket money or once you start to get your first part-time job. I think it's one of those things where you're given this currency in your hand, and you can really just go very wrong with it or just make really interesting investments with it. And I think that's where a lot of the shaping comes, right? From the experiences around us. But the baseline, if it's solid, which is education on money, in my opinion, that's what I'm picking up as a as a common ground that would serve for all the generations.
I like what you said about financial literacy, Goldie, because it kind of reminds me of what we touched upon in the fitness episode, all those episodes ago,
Yeah, yeah,
where the idea was about how if your parents are say fit or they have knowledge about health and fitness and they are an example for living example of embodying that, the kids are also going to inevitably pick up on those things, right? It's like it's passed down
yeah,
within family itself, because if the elder people in the family know, the younger ones are inevitably, whether they want to or not, they're going to absorb it in the conversation that goes on around in the house, right? So my experience, of course, with money, with our family and all, is like, is different to everybody else's, as
yeah,
everybody else's is to everybody else, uh, because of which my dad was very particular that once I started earning money and once my brother also started earning money, that he would find a financial advisor for us and connect that person to us and have us learn from this person and do
yeah.
basically what they suggest, because we don't really know. We may know all these terms, but we don't know how to put that into application. And if we don't know how to apply it, then what the hell are we doing really,
Yeah.
So yeah, I really
Yeah.
like the financial literacy angle that you brought to this conversation. Yeah.
I mean, I'm the first person who can say to you, for lack of a better word, I'm a financial dummy because I didn't have those conversations. I think a lot of it has to do even with the times I grew up in. Again, coming back to your experiences, the cultural setting I was in, the fact that I am female versus my male sibling. I mean, they're all layers, right, that add to the way that you visualize and see money and the access you have to it. So I think it's definitely a wonderful topic that you have chosen today to embark on, and I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah. I think bringing up financial literacy takes us very neatly into the next portion of this episode, which is on the attitudes around wealth and risk. Again, unless you are literate about this, you're going to have varying attitudes about this stuff, right? And Morgan Housel in his book makes a very profound statement where he talks about how wealth is what you don't see. Now, what's fascinating about that is how differently each generation interprets this idea. Now, older generations view wealth as quiet accumulation. There's this very nice example that is brought up in this book about a janitor who has amassed about $8 million in fortune through patiently investing and living modestly. And but that was what wealth was to this generation. No, you saved and you didn't show what you saved, and it's not about what you showed, right? But today, it's a very very different story. uh, Affluence is what you see because of what you see on social media, right? We live in a time, according to Hausen, where the world is between this fine line of rich and wealthy, and that line has become very blurred. Being rich right now is about what is your current income, fancy car, watch, house, things of that nature, right? But being wealthy is about the money not spent and the assets not yet converted into visual consumption. Let's talk about this risk tolerance concept. That's the idea that younger people have more tolerance for risk than older people and all, but we'll dive a little bit deeply into that. When baby boomers were, at their peak of their powers, let's say, they watched the market rise 40-fold during their prime years. And they often built wealth through traditional buying and hold investing. Ironically, they are now amongst the most risk averse people, and studies are showing that about 70% of boomers prioritize protecting their wealth over growing it. Now, with the younger generation, they face a very different reality. The median house price has jumped from four times the median income in 1950 to currently nearly 10 times that amount, with traditional paths to wealth feeling very, very cut off, blocked. That's why you'd see about 40% of millennials and Gen Z investing in cryptocurrency compared to just 3% of boomers. What's ironic is that younger generations may be seen as more risk taking or risk seeking, but they don't really have a choice because they're forced to take more risk just to achieve what the previous generation were able to do through conservative strategies. Now, I'm curious to know what kind of conversations you've seen happen in your own family, coming from a multi-generational, family setting from of your own, right?
Yeah, I want to just go back a second and not lose my thread of thought, which is on conservative strategy investing, which is, as we know, as you've explained, very synonymous to the boomer attitude. Why? Because they could, you know, uh, and in contrast, the millennials or even the oldest Gen Z who are maybe deliberating in thinking about where to invest now have to go a little bit more risk driven. I'm going to share an example that comes to me immediately. I won't talk about my own children because they're still far too young to think about long term investments. But I have seen a debate very often between my mother and my brother. Now, my mom is a boomer. My brother is a millennial. He's one of the older cohort of millennials. She believes in very strategic investments like real estate, and she has performed those. They've gone well for her. We're talking about when she did them in the 90s, so she's seen sort of the returns, the attractive returns. Now, she continued to do them in the mid to late 2000s, and there came a point where, as we all know, there was a big recession in the housing market. However, my brother has turned from that theory and he thrives on knowledge by default, very typically millennial. And so what he did was he educated himself on the more, the trading opportunities as you share his interests. He loves to learn about how to trade. Now, what's happening is they differ on their views on where to invest because she goes from her conservative strategies of real estate to thinking, quite literally, she calls it gambling. She thinks that if you trade, it's to gamble your money away. Why? Because there's troughs and peaks, highs and lows. But I come back to challenging her every time because I listen to them both. I don't take much interest in either because I'm not someone who has actively taken an interest in investing. I do my own thing, but I don't actively talk about it. But when I listen to them, I often tell her, well, I think what's missing for you, Mum, is the education behind what he has otherwise gained knowledge in. And you're seeing with your own eyes that, having your assets in the housing, in the real estate, is not giving you the same returns, so much so that there may be a stagnation now. And you need to rethink where you want to invest your funds. So yeah, I hope that answers your question and how we see things in different families when it comes to investing and saving and risk. And I think what you addressed was wealth and risk. Yeah.
There's a similar, say, philosophy even in my house.
Yeah.
Basically, it's how my mom is always running behind myself and my brother to put our money into like fixed deposit. Now, of course, there is a benefit in that. Of course, there is. There's a reason it exists. Right? So it's a wonderful tool, but to put a major chunk of our money into that does not seem like the wisest thing to do over the long term if you're expecting a higher amount of returns. Right? Maybe it worked differently back then,
Yeah.
but it's very different now. And I think like everybody holds very different values when it comes to money, when it comes to investing and all that stuff. And hers are very different to what
Yeah.
mine are, right? And if they're different within people of the same house, they're also going to be very different when you look at it between generations, right? And that is what we're going to be talking about in this third segment of the episode, which is the generational shifts in money values. Now, Housel makes this observation in the book where he talks about how people in the 1950s lived in homes that were half the size of today's homes with one car, one phone, and one TV. Now, and surveys show that they were just as happy, if not happier, than people are today. Let that sink in for a moment. Over the last few decades, incomes have risen, houses have gotten bigger, technology has made our lives way more convenient. We spoke about AI a few episodes back, way more convenient. But satisfaction and happiness have not kept pace with the increase in everything else. In fact, for a lot of people, they've declined. And the reason for that is because our expectations grow faster than reality. And one of the most thought provoking ideas in his book is that the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. When you look at baby boomers, they were raised to value security and stability. Owning a home was a symbol of making it. But their expectations were tempered by the difficult times that their parents had endured during the wartime. So gratitude was a natural response to having enough. Their goalposts stopped there because I'm just grateful I have something. When we look at now millennials and Gen Z, they are growing up in an era where social media showcases very, very curated highlights of other people's lives. The goalpost is always moving, not just for financial success, but for happiness in general. What was once a luxury is now seen as a baseline necessity. And Housel says it best: happiness is results minus expectations. It's a very nice quote, actually. The problem is not that we have less, it's that we expect more. Goldie, do you think that this shift in expectations is the reason why younger generations seem less satisfied compared, even though they have a lot more, material comfort? And do you think this is sustainable with given the, financial issues that they're already facing?
I have a lot of things to say about this, but what I'm going to start off by addressing is this word gratitude, which is this response to just having enough, right? Now, the contrast I see, and I think you observe this as well through your analogy on the reels that the Gen Z are seeing as a post to aspire to. And of course, this goalpost keeps changing, right? So, with that, what I'm observing is Gen Z are the generation of instant gratification, which means gratitude for them, I think, holds a whole other meaning. And it may not translate to just life being enough. It's what else? And so, with that, I don't want to by any means dismiss them as a generation, because that's not what we do here. But I want to give a few. Let's start with the pros on their values and how that can serve them in their long term financial security. I think the first one is definitely education. They have access to far more education and awareness, which can definitely lead to better financial decisions. Number two, I think, would be they are the gig economy, so they believe in diversifying their income streams, which I think is fascinating. So this means that this makes them more resilient when overcoming economic fluctuations. They have different ways to acquire that income when there is a struggle. Again, definitely a plus point in their generation. And then, because they are so socially responsible and aware of the differences that we all share worldwide, globally, I think this builds them up for having a more sustainable economy long term. Being socially responsible equates to a more sustainable economy. So these are the three things that are coming up for me as their advantages with their value system. However, there are cons, and that's what does worry me a little bit. This gig economy that I spoke about, what does that mean? It means that you can be flexible, that you actually don't have so much stability. There is a lack of stability, and therefore you have less benefits received. For example, health insurance. It's a lot more scarce for them. And I feel this is a long-term red flag when it comes to financial security for Gen Z. Okay. Being reliant on volatile markets like cryptocurrency, which is something they love, can also pose, I think, a little bit of risk to financial long-term security. But of course, if you get educated, like I said, in the field of what you are trying to invest in that requires high risk, there are ways to go about it. And let's not forget, they don't put all their eggs in one basket according to their values. They spread them, right? So I think, that being said, there's a lot of arguments in favor and against. And the last one that I definitely want to touch on is this whole piece on mental health. They love to talk about mental health at the core and center of their well-being, including their financial security. However, I do find that often, if you prioritize your mental health so much, you are missing aggressive investment opportunities. I firmly believe in that. And I think because the attitude of, oh, this is going to cause me too much stress, I will give it a miss, can be a missed opportunity for financial long-term stability. So for me, again, I come back to the core. I have an acronym, which is a SMART acronym. S is savings. So you need to understand where to place your money once you're earning it, divide it in places. Management. You need to learn how to manage your money. Little or more, you need to know how to manage it. The A is assets. So where is your wealth? Coming back to what you said, is it hidden? Is it visible? Okay, make it what you want to make it, but make sure it's there. Have access to it whenever you need it. And I think retirement is a huge one, which so many people forget. I'm not there yet, but I'm definitely thinking more about it than maybe you are, Lakshan. And the sooner we do, the better, because we are going to be working for much, much longer as we see it. So that would be the R. And the T is teaching, which goes back to learning. Learn. Don't stop learning. So there's my little bit of wisdom for you, my SMART acronym.
Yeah, that's lovely, Goldie. I think I'm going to steal that,
Okay.
especially the retirement bit. And I think the reason that somehow Gen Z don't seem to be looking at it like that, even like, say, Zillennials or the
Yeah.
younger cohort of people, right? I think it's also because at some capacity, while the goalpost is moving in many other aspects,
Mm,
even the working age as a goalpost also
yeah.
is moving, no? So I
Yeah.
think because of that, that perspective is hard for us to gauge. I think maybe that's one of the reasons that retirement is not a thing that we actively think about. At least I that's a reason. Maybe that's an excuse. I don't know, but at least that's what I'm coming up with right now for myself, at least. Yeah.
I think you're very right, Lakshan. Let's think about it in a very logical sense. What does retirement actually mean? It means having done something for a long period of time and then honoring yourself to take a retirement from it. It could be in anything. You know, I retire from being an author. I retire from running X number of marathons in my life because now I think my time is done and I owe myself this form of retiring from that. But as you rightly said, their goalpost, even for jobs, because of the gig economy piece, it keeps varying. And so much so that maybe in their 40s, they're starting a whole new career trajectory, which doesn't mean that retirement even crosses their mind because they are just starting something new all over again.
Yeah, it's like they've retired from one area and jumping into another one. So it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like retirement per se. It's just a pivot more than
A
retirement.
pivot,
And
exactly. Segueing, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that very nicely, like ties the ribbon of this gift, which is this episode. And we're coming to the conclusion of this. And the point of this episode basically is to talk about how each generation's mindset around money reflects the era in which they grow up. But here's the thing, there is no one right way to think about money. Whether it's saving like a boomer, which you should do, by the way, or living in the moment like a Gen Z, which also you should do, by the way. The key is understanding your personal relationship with money. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Instead of judging other generations, let's learn from their experiences to build a healthier, more balanced view of wealth. And that's actually how you mind the Gen Gap. If you enjoy this episode, share it with someone who has a very, very different take, a hot take even, about money. Maybe this will spark a much needed conversation about generations and money, finance, and wealth. With that, we've come to the end of episode 19 of Mind the Gen Gap podcast. I've been your host, Lakshan.
And I've been your co host, Goldie. Thank you for
Thank you.
listening.
Muchas
Sorry,
gracias.
I stole his line today, guys. Secretly, I wanted him to say it in Spanish.
See you in the next one.
Hasta pronto.
Bye.